They called him the one no man should buy. At the crowded auction yard, whispers moved faster than the bids. Men who had come ready with heavy purses suddenly stepped back. Eyes lingered on him, tall, powerful, strikingly handsome. Yet not a single hand rose. In a place where human lives were sold without hesitation, fear had crept in. Not fear of rebellion, not fear of escape. Fear of what they knew. The auctioneer's voice cracked as he tried again, lowering the price. Still, silence. Because every plantation owner there had heard the same warning. This man brought ruin wherever he was owned. Masters who bought him lost fortunes. Families fell apart. Some claimed sickness followed him. Others whispered of vengeance, slow and deliberate. No records explained it, only broken men who refused to speak. And when the widowed plantation mistress finally stepped forward and claimed him, the crowd did not protest. They watched her with pity, because she had just purchased a secret, buried in blood, silence, and retribution. And by nightfall, she would begin to understand why no one had dared to bid. The invitation arrived on black paper with silver ink, slipped under Adrian's apartment door, sometime between midnight and dawn. No postmark, no return address, just an embossed symbol of scales tipped deliberately to one side. You are cordially invited to participate in the Centennial Auction. Tonight, Warehouse 7, Port District. Come alone. Bring everything you own. Adrian held the card up to the morning light filtering through his studio apartment window. 26 years old, and he'd never seen anything like it. The paper felt expensive, heavy with implication. He should throw it away. He should call the police. Instead, he called in sick to his job at the call center and spent the day researching. By evening, he'd learned enough to be terrified. The Centennial Auction was whispered about in the darkest corners of the internet, in forms that required 3 levels of encryption to access. It happened once every 100 years, always in a different city. No one could verify if it was real or an urban legend that had taken on mythical proportions. The story said it was where the corrupt came to consolidate their power, where the wealthy could purchase anything at all, and where, supposedly, someone had once tried to auction off something so appalling that even the morally bankrupt attendees had refused to participate. Adrian looked around his apartment. Everything he owned could fit in his decade-old sedan. Student debt had seen to that. But the invitation had said to bring everything, and something in those words felt less like instruction and more like warning. He arrived at Warehouse 7 at 11:47 p.m. The Port District was abandoned this time of night, the old industrial buildings standing like tombstones against the sky. His headlights swept across rusted metal and broken windows until he found the number 7 painted in fading white on a corrugated steel door. 3 other cars were already parked in the shadows. Expensive ones. Adrian's Honda Civic looked like a child's toy beside them. He stepped out into the salt air and exhaled slowly. Last chance to leave. Last chance to pretend he'd never received the invitation, never felt that terrible curiosity pulling at him like a fishhook in his chest. The warehouse door opened. A woman stood silhouetted in golden light, wearing a blood-red suit that probably cost more than Adrian's yearly salary. Her smile was professional, practiced, and didn't reach her eyes. Name? Adrian Moss. She consulted a tablet, scrolled, nodded. You're expected. This way. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed. What should have been concrete floors and exposed beams was now an opulent auction house, complete with velvet seats, arranged in a semicircle around a raised platform. Crystal chandeliers hung from chains that disappeared into the darkness above. Perhaps 24 people occupied the seats, all of them radiating the quiet confidence that came from never having been told no. Adrian recognized 3 faces from the news: a tech billionaire, a pharmaceutical CEO currently under investigation, a politician who'd narrowly avoided prison on a technicality. Seat 12, the woman in red said, gesturing. Adrian found his seat near the back. The chair was more comfortable than his bed at home. On a small table beside him sat a paddle with the number 12 embossed in gold, along with a crystal glass of something amber and expensive. First time. The voice came from his left, an older man, perhaps 60, with silver hair and a tailored suit. His smile was grandfatherly, warm, and somehow made Adrian's skin crawl. Yes, Adrian admitted. Fascinating evening ahead. I've attended 3 of these now. The things people bring. He shook his head in wonder. The desperation, the audacity, it's quite something. What do you mean, what people bring? The man's smile widened. You don't know. Oh, this will be delightful. The Centennial Auction doesn't deal in objects, Mr. Moss. Adrian Moss. Mr. Moss. The Centennial Auction deals in people, or more specifically, in their futures, their potential, their very selves. He leaned closer. Everyone here has brought themselves to auction. The question is, what are you worth? Adrian's blood went cold. I don't understand. You will. The lights dimmed. The murmur of conversation died. A spotlight illuminated the platform, and a man in a black suit materialized there as if conjured from shadow. He was neither young nor old, neither handsome nor ugly, aggressively unremarkable in every way, except his eyes, which glittered with something Adrian couldn't name. Welcome, the auctioneer said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space, to the 214th Centennial Auction. The rules are simple. Each of you has chosen to place yourself on the auction block. Each of you has brought the sum total of your worth, your assets, your debts, your very existence, to be claimed by the highest bidder. He paused, letting that sink in. The buyer purchases not just your current net worth, but your future earning potential, your connections, your body and mind, for a period of 7 years. You will work for them, serve them, enrich them in whatever capacity they see fit. In return, at the end of 7 years, you receive double what you were purchased for, enough to transform your circumstances forever. Adrian's hands gripped the armrests. This was insane. This was illegal. This was... Of course, the auctioneer continued, some of you will not be purchased at all. If no one bids on you, you leave exactly as you came, having learned precisely what you're worth in the eyes of those who shape the world. His smile was knife-thin. Let us begin. The first person brought to the platform was a young woman, perhaps 22, trembling in a simple dress. Her financial documents were displayed on screens that descended from the ceiling. $180,000 in student debt, no assets, a biology degree, strong academic record. The bidding was brief and brutal. A biotech executive purchased her for $50,000, a fraction of what she owed, but apparently all she was worth. She left the platform in tears, clutching a contract. The second was a middle-aged man, a failed entrepreneur with business acumen and a long list of contacts. He went for $200,000 to a venture capitalist who smiled like a shark. One by one, people sold themselves. Adrian watched in growing horror as human beings were reduced to numbers, to potential returns on investment. Some seemed relieved to be chosen. Others left broken, having discovered they were worth less than they'd hoped. Or worse, worth more than they'd wanted to be, purchased by people whose eyes promised 7 years of hell. Then came number 7. The man who walked onto the platform was objectively stunning. Tall, perfectly proportioned, with features that belonged on magazine covers. He moved with the unconscious grace of someone who'd spent his life being admired. His financial documents showed modeling contracts, endorsement deals, a social media following in the millions. The auctioneer smiled. Marcus Chen, 28 years old, current net worth, negative $2.3 million due to a series of unfortunate investments. However, his earning potential is extraordinary. Shall we start the bidding at $500,000? Silence. Adrian frowned. Marcus was clearly valuable. His face alone could sell products. His social media reach could move markets. Why wasn't anyone? $400,000, the auctioneer tried. Nothing. $300,000. The silence grew heavier, expectant. Marcus stood under the spotlight, confusion flickering across his perfect features. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer said, and now there was an edge to his voice. "Surely someone recognizes the value." "We all recognize the value," a woman called from the front row. Adrian recognized her. Senator Patricia Vance, known for her ruthless political maneuvering. "That's precisely why no one is bidding." The auctioneer's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. "Would you care to elaborate, Senator?" She stood, turning to address the room. In the spotlight's backwash, her face looked carved from marble. Marcus Chen represents a very specific kind of commodity, beautiful, charismatic, influential. The kind of person who could be used to seduce, to manipulate, to gain access to places and people that money alone cannot reach. Marcus's face had gone pale. "But here's the problem," Senator Vance continued. "Anyone who purchases him advertises exactly what they intend to use him for. And in doing so, they make him useless for that purpose. The moment Marcus Chen becomes known as someone's kept man, his power to influence evaporates. People will know he's been bought. They'll know every smile, every conversation, every intimacy is transactional." She gestured broadly. "Everyone in this room could use someone like him. But the moment any one of us claims him, he becomes worthless. And our competitors learn something about our methods and our vulnerabilities. He's like a weapon that can only be fired once before everyone knows you have it." Adrian felt sick. They were talking about a human being, like he was a strategic asset, a chess piece. "So we have a standoff," the tech billionaire said from across the room. "Beautiful." The politician who'd avoided prison laughed. "The most desirable auction item in decades, and he's worthless precisely because he's desirable. There's a metaphor in there somewhere." Marcus stood frozen, his perfect face now a mask of humiliation. Adrian could see his hands shaking. "Going once," the auctioneer said quietly. No one moved. "Going twice?" The silence was absolute. "Sold to?" "No one." Marcus walked off the platform on unsteady legs. As he passed Adrian's seat, their eyes met for just a moment. The pain there was raw, absolute. The specific agony of being simultaneously desired by everyone and chosen by no one. The auction continued. 3 more people sold themselves. Then it was Adrian's turn. His legs felt like water as he climbed onto the platform. The spotlight was hot, blinding. He couldn't see the faces in the audience, just shapes in the darkness. His documents appeared on the screens. $89,000 in student loans, $12,000 in credit card debt, $3,200 in his checking account, no assets beyond a failing car and some second-hand furniture. Bachelor's degree in literature, currently working at a call center. No special skills, no connections, no remarkable qualities whatsoever. Adrian Moss, the auctioneer intoned. Shall we start the bidding at $20,000? Silence. Adrian had expected this. He wasn't like the others. He had nothing to offer, but standing there feeling the weight of their disinterest, their dismissal, was different than imagining it. He was a rounding error in their world, less than worthless, a waste of their time. $10,000, nothing. The auctioneer sighed. Going once. I'll bid, a voice said. Adrian squinted into the darkness. The speaker stood up, moving into the light. It was Marcus Chen. The auctioneer frowned. Mr. Chen, you are not a purchaser. You were yourself just... I know what I was. Marcus's voice was steady now, hard. But I didn't sell, which means I still own myself. And I'd like to use what's left of my assets to purchase Adrian Moss. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Your assets, the auctioneer said slowly, amount to significant debt. You have nothing to bid with. Then put me back on the block. Package deal. Marcus climbed back onto the platform, standing beside Adrian. Both of us, together. Whoever buys us, gets us both. This is highly irregular. Is it? Forbidden? Marcus challenged. The auctioneer's jaw tightened. No. Then let's see what we're worth together. Adrian stared at him. Why are you doing this? Marcus looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. Not the practiced, perfect smile of someone used to being admired, but something smaller, sadder, and infinitely more real. Because I'm tired of being seen as just a face. And because you looked at me like I was a person when I walked off that platform. Everyone else looked at me like I was a failed investment. He turned back to the audience. So here's my bid. I will work for whoever purchases both of us, using whatever remains of my public persona and connections. But Adrian works beside me as my equal, my partner. You get both of us, or you get neither. The room erupted in conversation. Adrian's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. Senator Vance stood again. An interesting gambit, Mr. Chen, but you're still announcing to everyone here exactly what you are. Someone's acquisition. No, Marcus said. I'm announcing that I choose who I work with, that I have standards, that even people who end up in places like this have the right to dignity. His voice rose. You all wanted to use me as a tool, but you couldn't because you were afraid of what it would reveal about you. But maybe the real problem is that you forgot tools can choose how they're used. $50,000, a voice called out. Adrian couldn't see who. $75,000, another. $100,000. The bidding accelerated. Adrian stood in the spotlight, mind reeling as the price climbed. $200,000, $300,000. They weren't just bidding on labor now. They were bidding on the story, on the defiance, on the spectacle of the beautiful man who'd been rejected, choosing the invisible nobody as his partner. $500,000, Senator Vance called out, standing. And I'll tell you all why I'm bidding. Not because I want to use Mr. Chen for his looks, but because I need. People who understand that power isn't just about what you have. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice. These two just made themselves more valuable by refusing to play by our rules. The room went quiet. Go in once, the auctioneer said. No one countered. Going twice? Adrian looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. In the space between them was an understanding, a recognition, not of attraction or even friendship yet, but of something more fundamental. The acknowledgement that they were both human beings who'd been reduced to commodities, and that they'd found a way to reclaim some fragment of their dignity in the process. Sold, the auctioneer declared, to Senator Vance for $500,000. They signed the contracts in a small room off the main floor. 7 years of service, double the purchase price at the end, split between them. Senator Vance sat across the table, her expression unreadable. I want to be clear about what you'll be doing, she said. I don't need Mr. Chen to seduce anyone. I don't need Mr. Moss to serve coffee. What I need are people who understand how power actually works. Not the power that comes from money or beauty or connections, but the power that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to let others define it for you. She slid 2 additional documents across the table. You'll work in my office, analyzing systems of inequality, finding loopholes, and pressure points in legislation that oppresses people. You'll help me dismantle some of the structures that create places like this auction. She paused. I come to these events not to purchase people, but to document them, to understand who attends, what they buy, what they value. I've been building a case for years. Adrian stared at her. You're not one of them? I am, actually. I've done terrible things to get where I am, but I'm trying to be better. And I need people who understand both the system's appeal and its cost. She looked at Marcus. You were offered the world on a silver platter because of how you look, and you still ended up here. You know how beauty can be both armor and prison. She turned to Adrian. And you've been invisible your entire life, told you have nothing to offer. You know what it's like to be dismissed. Together you represent the full spectrum of how this system breaks people. Marcus spoke carefully. And if we say no, then you walk away. The contract requires your consent. I'm offering you a different kind of 7 years than what you expected. Still hard, still demanding, but in service of something that might actually matter. Adrian and Marcus looked at each other. 7 years was a long time, but 7 years at the call center, drowning in debt, would have been longer. 7 years as someone's status symbol would have been unbearable. I'm in, Marcus said. Adrian took a deep breath. Me too. They signed. The news broke 3 days later. Senator Vance held a press conference, flanked by Adrian and Marcus, and exposed the centennial auction. Not just that it existed, but who attended, what they'd purchased, how the wealthy literally bought and sold people under the cover of contracts and agreements. The backlash was immediate and severe. Investigations launched. Arrests were made. The auction house was raided, but it was already empty. Just a warehouse. Again, all evidence of opulence vanished like it had never existed. Adrian and Marcus became minor celebrities, their faces associated with exposing the auction. It complicated their work, made them targets. But Senator Vance had been right. Their combination of visibility and invisibility, beauty and ordinariness, made them effective in ways neither could have been alone. They shared an apartment in the city, cheaper than two separate places and practical for the long hours they worked. Over time, that practicality became something else. A friendship built on shared trauma and shared purpose, on late nights, reviewing documents and early mornings strategizing with Senator Vance's team. 2 years into their 7-year contract, they sat on their small balcony, watching the sun rise over the city. "Do you ever think about that night?" Adrian asked. "About what would have happened if you hadn't bid on me?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Every day, I think I would have left that warehouse and spent the rest of my life knowing I'd been rejected by people I didn't respect, for reasons that made me hate myself." He turned to look at Adrian. "But I also think about what would have happened to you." "I would have gone home, gone back to the call center, kept drowning quietly." "No," Marcus said, "you wouldn't have. Because you're the only person there who looked at all of us, not just me, but everyone on that platform, like we were people. Not investments or acquisitions or failures, but human beings in a nightmare situation. That's not someone who drowns quietly." Adrian smiled. "We're quite a pair. The man who was worth everything and nothing simultaneously, and the man who was worth nothing until someone bothered to look." "We're worth what we decide we're worth," Marcus corrected. "That's what that night taught me. They tried to reduce us to numbers on a spreadsheet, to commodities to be bought and sold. But we're not products. We're people. And people can always choose dignity, even when the system tells them they can't afford it." The sun continued its slow climb, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the city below, systems of power continued to grind away, reducing humans to resources, dignity to currency. But in that moment, on that balcony, two people who'd been told they were worthless had found something that couldn't be auctioned off or purchased, something that no amount of money could devalue. They'd found themselves, and in doing so, they'd found each other. And that, Adrian thought as Marcus leaned against his shoulder, was worth more than any bid could ever capture. 5 years later, when their contract ended and Senator Vance cut them checks for $500,000 each, Marcus and Adrian used the money to start a foundation. They called it The Unbought, and its mission was simple: providing resources and legal support for people trapped in exploitative contracts, predatory debt, and systems designed to reduce human beings to their market value. On the wall of their office, they hung a frame containing 2 items: the black invitation with its silver ink and tipped scales, and below it, a single line in Marcus's handwriting: "Some things cannot be sold because they were never for sale." They never forgot the warehouse, the spotlight, the moment when they'd been forced to confront their worth in the eyes of people who dealt in human commodities. But they also never forgot the moment they'd chosen each other, chosen dignity, chosen to believe that being human meant more than any price tag could capture. The centennial auction would happen again in another 100 years. But Adrian and Marcus would spend every day until then working to ensure that fewer people would be desperate enough, broken enough, or lost enough to accept an invitation written in silver ink. And on the nights when the work seemed impossible, when the systems they fought seemed too entrenched to ever change, they would sit together and remember they had stood on that platform, refused to accept the world's valuation, and walked away as partners rather than purchasers. That was worth everything. That was worth more than everything. That was priceless.